Madam President, this morning, when I presented the motion, I had felt, perhaps for once, that we could have agreed on some basic things about what was going on with this St. Jude Hospital situation. And so this is why, when I presented the motion, I didn't venture into any serious historical misdeeds from anybody. I simply looked at the issue of the money that is being borrowed, the terms and conditions, as well as making a very emphatic point that what we want in this government's case is to complete the facility. But you see, we have an opposition that has a particular posture. And no matter what we do, no matter what we come here for, they have a script that they have to read from. Certain things must be said, even if it's not relevant to what is before us. Because some of us, or some of the opposition, has not been able to distinguish between the chamber in Parliament and the platform on the boulevard or wherever they go. And so there has to be this drama and this, all of this bantering. But Madam President, let us try to refocus this discussion. I want to say, first of all, and I am convinced today, after listening to what has gone on in this debate, both houses, that this opposition, their biggest nightmare right now,
tell me about it,
is the thought of the hospital being completed. You see, never mind the few utterances in between that we want the hospital to, I think the average St. Lucian does want the hospital to be completed. But for this opposition, Madam President, that is the biggest nightmare. And it has nothing to do with what they want for the people of St. Lucia. They know the price that they put on that hospital when they were in government. They know the consequence that they face because they decided to play with the people's money.
That's right.
And now that the government of the St. Lucia Labour Party has come to town and has made a very strong statement that this hospital will be finished. Quiz capo.
Yes, we will.
But anyway, let me get back to focus. Madam President, you see, when you try to bluff, sometimes the truth comes out of a certain corner of your mouth, inevitably. And so the leader of opposition business, in his attempt to mimic and copy his other leaders' approach, decided to quote extensively from a particular document which he refers to or has been referred to as the Shanta King Report. And in his own words, Madam President, and I quote, he said that the opposition is not happy with the Shanta King Report. When we realized he had said that, he tried to, take it back, but he had said it.
Yes, that's true.
And I'll tell you what I deduced from that, Madam President. There are two things I deduce. One, it's either the leader of opposition business was speaking one word of, or one statement of truth after all, or secondly, that he has not realized that he is in opposition. So he's referring to us as the opposition when he has, and I believe the latter might be the case. Because every time they come to this chamber, they behave as if they have the right to govern. But the St. Lucians gave this opposition the right to govern for 5 years.
5 years. 5 years. 5 years. 5 years. 5 years. 5 years. 5 years. 5 years. 5 years. 5 years. 5 years. 5 years. 5 years. 5 years. 5 years. 5 years. 5 years. 5 years. 5 years. 5 years. 5 years. 5 years. 5 years. 5 years. 5 years. 5 years. 5 years. 5 years. 5 years. 5 years. 5 years. 5 years. 5 years. 5 years. 5 years. 5 years. 5 years. 5 years. 5 years. 5 years. 5 years. 5 years. 5 years. 5 years. 5 years. 5 years. 5 years. 5 years. 5 years. 5 years. 5 years. 5 years. 5 years. 5 years. 5 years. 5 years. 5 years. 5 years. 5 years. 5 years. 5 years. 5 years. 5 ye
And when we lost the elections, we put our tail between our legs. We went back, we reflected on what we may have done wrong. I sat on this side for 5 years. I was in this chamber. We supported certain bills. We supported certain initiatives when they were in the interest of the people. And we gave the government suggestions. We conducted ourselves as an opposition that was responsible and did what we had to do. Waited our 5 years. They went on a runter and a banter, all kinds of things they did, offended the people of this country to the extent that the people took them out of office. And now they are coming to this chamber and referring to us as the opposition. But you see, Madam President, the records never lie. There are some things, you pass a point. So, Madam President, it was quite appropriate when the leader of opposition business made that statement. Madam President, this Shanta King report has become a very popular document of this House all of a sudden. Say Shanta, 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 Shanta. Everybody is Shanta. So the Shanta King report is now the reference point of the opposition. Madam President, I did indicate that I sat over there for 5 years in the Senate. And I remember in both houses, the opposition then, I am very careful, the opposition then made several requests, implored the government to make available that report that we knew existed. Having fired the young lady, who is now their hero, they refused to make this document public. Instead, the opposition, the then government, went out and conducted what they called an audit. Spent $1 million or so of our taxpayers' money and threatened to send people to jail and all of those things. Up to this day, we have not gotten any information on the contents of that audit. And so, we kept asking about that report. But today, for 5 years, no report. Because they knew that in this report, there were things that were very serious and could have implicated them. But it's the same report, Madam President, that today, both houses and both opposition leaders in both houses have found it convenient to almost read it verbatim. And so when I come here and I present a motion, stayed away from the politics of it, stuck to the contents of the motion and how it is going to benefit the people of St. Lucia, how well negotiated the terms and the conditions of the loan were, couldn't help themselves but take it down a road that they have more carbuncles to deal with than anyone else. And so, Madam President, this had to be put into context. You see, in the effort of the leader of opposition business to quote from the report, he referenced a gentleman named John Peters. And he was using that gentleman's statement in 2017 to make a point about wastage. Madam President, où kwe moun pe vini ici ya? On ti misye te ka pale di gaspiller l'argent pendant temps yo te a gouvernement. Mais ça c'était 2017. Yo te a gouvernement ka gaspiller l'argent. Ti misye a ka di yo las gaspiller l'argent. Mais en 2023, jodi a, yo ka servi par wol ti misye a pour parler de gaspiller. So, Madam President, what I want to know is...
Madam President, I rise to a point of order.
You sure
what is your point of order, Senator
Madam
Fede?
President, the member is misleading the House grossly, deliberately. Madam President, I quoted Mr. John Peters, who made this statement back in 2017. And John Peters was actually commenting on the FDL report, which was criticizing, was a report done auditing the first phase of the St. Jude's project. And what has actually happened, Madam President, is that at that time, we were just auditing what was happening. We were taking our time to understand. We had not started construction or made a decision on which direction we were going with St. Jude's. So at the time Mr. Peters made the statement, we could not have been criticizing us. You're grossly misleading the House, please, so just correct that statement.
Proceed.
Thank you, Madam President. I know I made the statement in Creole, so I excuse my colleague if he had difficulty interpreting what I just said. Madam President, I'm moving on with the John Peters issue. You see, in referencing John Peters and wastage, I think the leader of opposition business was giving us further clarity on who was wasting and what was wasted. So I thank him for that. Because in 2017, we know who was in government. It was the United Workers' Party government. And we know what happened during their tenure. So I think they are better able to talk about wastage than we are. Madam President, I will not spend the entire rebuttal going back at what the opposition said. But there are a couple of things I will put into perspective before I close. And so, Madam President, let us talk about the state-of-the-art argument. The state-of-the-art hospital. We were giving, the people were going to get a state-of-the-art hospital. Can someone remember how much money was spent on what was considered by this opposition as state-of-the-art? State-of-the-art?
We need to know.
And what we have today, it is still there, and I thank the Prime Minister in his wisdom. We did not demolish it. We're not into demolishing things that people have spent taxpayers' money on. We didn't demolish it. It's there for everyone to see. Up to this day, anyone who wishes can go and have a look at what it is. The state-of-the-art facility is still there, quote unquote. And what is the state-of-the-art? Three things, Madam President. Cladding, drywall, and a metal frame. That's state-of-the-art. And well, waterfall from the top when it rains. Can you tell St. Lucians who can still visit Vieux-Fort? Vieux-Fort is not far from here. You can get here in an hour. Who can go there and see for themselves what you did with how much? Almost 200 million? And you're telling me today in 2023 that this is what state-of-the-art was? And on the eve of elections, trying to borrow so much money, 70 plus million. I mean, state of the art, I think by now we are better able to understand state of the art because now we are doing the state of the art work. So, Madam President, I had to deal with the state of the art concept because I think we understand what it means. Now, during the discussion, there were moments when I was very confused about the posture of the opposition. Not for the first time. I was asking myself, is the opposition supporting the motion or are they opposed to the motion? Because I remember the opening statement of the leader of opposition business was that he's opposed to this thing. You know, and I was saying under my breath, it's not how loud you say it, but it's what you say. But somewhere during the presentation, I pointed it out that I heard him say he supports the motion. So again, I am not sure what the opposition's position is. Not for the first time that I have heard them, one of them say I support and the other one says I don't. Today, the same person took two positions. So I'm not sure how they flip on the same issue. Now, Madam President, another issue that was raised was the idea of PPP, public-private partnership. It appears that the opposition has finally come to appreciate the importance of PPP. Because I remember previously. Again, I have the benefit of hindsight because I want to remind my colleagues that I did sit over there for 5 years. And it did me a whole lot of good, Madam President, because I sat there and I absorbed a lot of information. I absorbed a lot from the government and from my experience in the Senate. So there are certain things I know happened, and I can make reference to them today. That PPP idea didn't seem very popular then, because I remembered us having an issue with an Euronora International Airport, where there was about 400 plus million US that had to be borrowed for some reason, where the government then decided to abandon a PPP and take a loan to put on the backs of our St. Lucians to do the airport, because the reasons I don't want to go into, because it'll take me to another debate. But that was a PPP arrangement with a reputable firm that had built airports around the world. And we begged the government not to go there, leave the PPP agreement alone, and allow the airport to be built without costing St. Lucians a cent. And these are the examples of wastage that I tell you, Madam President, this opposition is much better at describing than we are. So I heard reference to OBIA. I mean, how could you come to the Senate and talk about those things? I'm not going into this OBIA thing. That's not my line. So, Madam President, PPP now is the best thing since sliced bread because you are in opposition. But you take a 400 plus million, almost $1 billion EC dollars worth project, and you don't see the wisdom in allowing a PPP. And give a direct purchase, a direct award. A direct award, Madam President. And I'm sure I heard the leader of opposition business talk about tendering, didn't he? He stood in this chamber talking about tendering. 30 direct, was it 30? Am I correct? 30 direct awards signed in a day by an acting prime minister. Under his watch, he was in cabinet. The other two senators, they were not in cabinet. He was in cabinet.
The director of implementation.
And then, one of them was implementing. Well, she's my good friend. Let me leave her out of that for now. Unless she provokes me otherwise. But the leader of opposition business was in a cabinet where his acting prime minister signed 30 direct awards in a day. And a direct award was given for the largest infrastructure project ever to be undertaken in this country. But today, he will come and talk about tendering.
Don't demonize it.
Tendering. And I think we understand why direct awards are given. And I must say, this government is not afraid to say that we can justify our decisions, you know. We know that direct awards are not necessarily the best approach to procuring and to deal with projects. But I think everybody in St. Lucia now knows that this hospital is a matter of urgency. It is a matter of urgency. And if the best possible route to get it completed within the best possible time is to go that way, then we will. But you see, I suspect they know more about the contractor. They asked about the contractor. But I suspect, and I will also tell Senator Lee, who also mentioned it, that I think the opposition senator knows a lot more about the contractor than we do, or you do. Because they had already published that he was fired and he was going out and had photos all over the social media about the contractor leaving the site. You understand? So it seems that they had perhaps hoped that it was someone else. And so they were posting on social media about the contractor leaving the site. And today they come and ask, who's the contractor? It's the same contractor you posted about leaving the site. That's the contractor. So, Madam President, you might find my posture this morning a little bit confrontational. But again, I always say that when provoked, I will not sit here or stand here and allow this opposition to get away. And I think this morning, the leader of opposition business has sufficiently provoked the argument. Now, it's not personal, I must say. It's not personal. Because afterward, I can go and bowl a few bouncers to him outside. Right? So it's not personal. But it is very serious when these statements are made in this chamber that, first of all, are unfounded, untrue, and should be pointing directly at the opposition. Madam President, when the leader of opposition business had no more arguments, in his 40 minutes that I think he completely wasted, what an opportunity wasted. Here was your final opportunity to give some value and support to something that the government is doing, and you have agreed that it is needed by the country, by the people of this country. But then you waste almost all of your argument, and then towards the end, talking about comparing the size of reports. I'm seeing him holding a report and saying this one is bigger, look at the size of this one. One yellow, one. Madam President, I am not sure that the leader of opposition business is the best person to be making fun of size. To suggest that anything that's smaller or shorter is of less significance than something that is bigger and tall. If that logic were to be applied to the Senate, then I think some people would have been unfairly judged. So I will not go down on the you come into the Senate to debate borrowing money to finish a hospital. Your argument is so shallow that you take documents and you look at how thick they are and how small they are, and you're comparing which one is bigger and which one is smaller.
But quoting from the smaller one.
And quoting extensively from the smaller one.
Those are too narrow.
Madam President, I would not go down that line if I was the leader of the opposition, comparing size and relevance. There is no, I hope I am correct, there is no correlation between the size of documents and their importance or relevance.
Size of anything and its relevance.
So I think you should stay away from the size argument. Madam President, I want to wrap up. And before I do, I want to respond to some of the observations made by the independent senator. And you see, as a government, we're not getting vexed with people with independent views. I know he threw some real tough questions and some really, telling arguments on this, and I expect that. He's an independent senator. That is what he's here to do. And if some of these are leveled at the government, we will take it. We will take it. But it was interesting when he started how hard the tables were being hit. But towards the end of his argument, I saw complete silence. Madam President, one of the things that he mentioned was the communication, telling St. Lucians what is going on, the cost and the developments and where are we with the project. Madam President, just by way of information, I want to inform him that on the project, we actually have a communications team headed by Jude Brown, who gives regular, weekly updates on the progress of the hospital.
That never stopped.
And I want to not think that he was being in any way malicious. I think he genuinely would not have had that information, but I just want him to know that that is there. And it's not just one individual. There are also technical people who feed the information to that communications team to give St. Lucians regular weekly updates on the progress and the development at the St. Jude Hospital. Right? And so even the media is always welcome. They have brought them onto the site to do tours. We're not hiding anything. I remembered when we wrote the government then as an opposition to ask for permission to visit the site. As His Majesty's opposition, we had the courtesy of writing to the government to ask for permission to go and visit the site. That we were denied.
That's right.
Used to be standing there blocking it.
I don't know. I'm hearing that one of the current senators was standing in the way. I don't know. I didn't see that. But if that was so, why are you now, pretending as if you don't know what's going on? Well, at least we are open, Independent Senator Lee, to that discussion, and I have no difficulty with your observation. We are just saying that we are doing so, and we welcome any other suggestion that will help to bring more clarity and more accountability to the people of this country. I have no problems with that. Madam President, I heard also an argument about the Ministry of Infrastructure. The Ministry of Infrastructure. And that was by my colleague, Senator Polius. in the beginning of the argument, that the Ministry of Infrastructure needs to be in charge of this. But Madam President, it seems that the opposition is now aware that this project should have actually been under the supervision of the Ministry of Infrastructure. This government has made sure that infrastructure, economic development, and health, all three are collaborating to ensure that this project goes on. But let's examine what was happening under the nose of, where's my colleague? He left. Under his nose then in government, that the Ministry of Economic Development, under the auspices of a certain minister, who apparently was in charge of everything, was the one providing oversight on a project, which is a major infrastructure project.
Trying to marginalize his own colleague who headed the infrastructure ministry.
I mean, and you know what happened as a result, Madam President? The result is here for all of us to see. The then Minister for Infrastructure was completely alienated.
That's right.
But you see, today, he has found the right place on the side of the St. Lucia Labour Party government.
That's it, the right side.
Because
The right side.
perhaps it's the right side in this chamber, and it's the right side full stop.
That's right.
Because I suspect that if the project, and this one is for St. Lucians to take seriously, if the project had been allowed to be supervised by the Ministry of Infrastructure, where the technocrats and all the technical experts were, that we would not have been where we were today. You see? So, Madam President, it is interesting now that the opposition is talking about the Ministry of Infrastructure with reference to the St. Jude Hospital.
Yes.
The Ministry of Infrastructure was always there. It was there in 2016 to 2021. It was there. But a certain, you know, totality, they call it, totalitarian individual decided that it has to be under Ministry of Economic Development.
And when he was finally beaten, he said that he cannot complete it.
So, Madam President, St. Lucians did what the then minister asked, that if they couldn't complete the hospital, vote them out. St. Lucians did that. So he got one thing right. He gave St. Lucians good advice, and they followed it. Madam President, I hear an argument that continues to be repeated about old buildings. I think Senator Polius made reference to it, and I heard it on Tuesday. What are you doing with this? Why are you sending people into these old buildings? So there is this attempt to compare the original site of St. Jude, which was built for military purposes, telling you about the resilience and the strength of the structures. It has sentimental value because I remembered in the opening argument of the leader of opposition business, he spoke about Sister of the Sorrowful Mothers and all of those things attaching sentimental value to the building. But then his colleague will stand up and say, oh, old buildings, 80-year-old buildings. You see, this opposition has always had a problem with buildings of that sort. Because we had a building that was how much? About 100 years old?
Yes.
That they just decided to demolish. Right there. Right there. Just demolish it. They had plans to demolish this very building that we're standing in. Demolish everything that has some kind of historical and sentimental value to this government or the people of this country. As if there is an attempt to wipe out the history of St. Lucia altogether. That will never happen because the people of this country appreciate who they are, their identity and their history. And even to the extent that their own political logo was, I knew about flambeau, but now I see. So there is this kind of movement to change the identity of everything. And every building that appears to have some kind of sentimental, historical value has to be demolished to build boxes. But our people understand those things. We understand the importance of that. I heard an argument about old buildings, 80-year-old. When you go, the tourism industry, I wish the minister was there, the former minister was there, he was the former minister of tourism. The tourism industry of the UK, particularly the Britain, is strongly built on preserving old buildings. How old is Big Ben? And all of those, when you do a tour of London a whole day, 99% of what you see is preserved old buildings and old things with age, centuries old. They use that as a tool to market their country. People pay millions every year to go and see those things. But in St. Lucia, anything that has historical value, mash it up. No wonder there was all these issues with the National Trust. The National Trust. I can understand why the Conservation Authority and the National Trust had so many issues with the then government. But Madam President, I did see that this morning I didn't want to spend my entire rebuttal on those things. One more thing I need to mention, and that is on a matter of a technical matter. Whether or not the new, what they consider the state-of-the-art building, that box was completed. And our government has been very careful not to destroy it. So it means we have plans for it. But it would not, on its own, suffice and be able to provide all the services that the hospital would have needed. So even if, for some reason, that box were to have been completed, it would still require the other buildings, the original buildings, to be able to provide all the services that were there. And so, in going forward, our government, when we have completed, by the grace of God, when we would have completed the St. Jude facility on the original site, we will ensure that this structure, this building, this box, is not just thrown away as if it didn't have any, that no money was spent on it. We will find a very appropriate way to utilize it. Just like we will do with the piles on the airport. So, Madam President, I want to thank my colleagues, particularly the independent senator, for raising some very pertinent issues that we will not ignore. I want to thank the opposition for giving me content to respond to. But I caution the opposition going forward. We have a bill to come. Do not go and open those doors that stare you in the face. Just because you believe that you have an argument that can sound popular among your supporters on a platform, it doesn't mean that it holds any weight on the stage of proper deliberations where ideas contend. This is a stage here, Madam President, where ideas contend. Ideas may differ, but you need to allow ideas to contend. But it's not a stage to come and posture with untruths, grandstand on things that you are guilty of, and then you find yourself making statements like the opposition is not happy with Shantaki. So, Madam President, once again, I reiterate the support of myself and my colleagues for this motion. I congratulate and commend the Prime Minister for his ability to negotiate such a wonderful package. I assure St. Lucians that we could continue to work on this hospital and as well as the sports stadium to deliver to the people something that they have waited 14 years plus for, and that we will do so in the quickest possible time. I thank you, Madam President.